So I thought this would be a good segue to him, because we haven't done that much political stuff right here. Is this a political movement? Is this the beginnings of a political movement?
No, I don't think so. I think what it is the conduct. It's the conducting of proper political discourse. And maybe you could say, well, it would be a political movement to foster the conducting of proper political discourse. That's possible, but it's a strange political movement, because it's a political movement that's concentrating on process rather than content.
Yeah.
I think that partly what I'm doing in my tour is the fostering of genuine discourse. But I don't think that's as political. I don't think of that as a political movement. I think of it as a psychological movement, or I don't know. Are constitutional principles in the political domain? I would say no, they're outside the political domain, because they're axioms. So they're inside some other domain. They're inside a philosophical domain or a theological domain. And I think a discussion that's associated with proper political process isn't a political discussion. I think it's a meta-political discussion.
So would a better way to ask the question then be, do we just need a political party or a political group or a politician or whatever to just pick up on this and then incorporate it, so that it's not a movement in and of itself? I understand what you're saying.
Well, I went and talked to, what's the name of that group? Turning Point America. I went and talked to...
Turning Point USA.
Yeah, Turning Point USA. I went and talked to their women's meeting. They had about 1,200 women down in, we were in Dallas. And one of the things I recommended to them was that instead of concentrating on the content of their ideology, because they're branding themselves in some sense as a conservative movement, that they devote themselves to educating themselves as much as they possibly can, because they're going to produce a much bigger impact by becoming better individuals than they are by promoting conservative doctrine. That's what it looks like to me. Even though there's some utility in promoting conservative doctrine on the campuses, at least as a counterbalance to the overwhelming preponderance of radical leftist thinking. But I don't think the fundamental movement necessary here is political, because I think the political is actually part of the problem. So that's how it looks to me.
I think we're the advanced group sent to take a hill for a healthy political discourse that follows us.
Yes, and that's hopefully that would be the situation.
Taking Turning Point USA, I was shocked that Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens reached out to me, and I was like, you do understand who I am.
Right.
And I'm very confused by it, because I find that a lot of the rhetoric that comes out of that absolutely unpalatable. And the private discourse is much more sympathetic, much more understanding. I think that the political
some of that's a lack of sophistication, actually, on the part of the people who are doing it.
But I think we can move those guys, because just for the record, I just want to say that when they invite me to speaking gigs, Charlie said to me from day one, he said, I disagree with you on a ton of stuff, but I want to invite you here to speak. And I go up there and I talk about being gay, married, and pro-choice, and against the death penalty, and all of these things, and they give me a standing ovation.
But then the problem is that nobody can figure out why I'm talking to Candace Owens, because when she's going in red meat conservative mode, I don't recognize the same person who reached out to me, and
Well, I don't think it is the same person exactly. I think that there's a fractionation there as well.
Well, I understand, because of the niche, and the idea is that there is not yet a niche. This came up with Douglas Murray. It's a super important point. In general, people are in a restrictionist mood on immigration, and they want more protectionism with respect to trade. And the question, like let's take with immigration, is why is it that no politician finds it easy to exploit this without going completely far right or completely open borders? Like either it's ethno-nationalism or it's all people are equal, why should we discriminate from people in any other country? And the sensible positions are uninhabitable. And so the question is why? And so the claim that I'm making is you have to really know your stuff at the moment if you're going to hold a position like we cannot be xenophobic, we have to be somewhat restrictionist, we cannot close the borders, immigration. I mean, I particularly
you put your finger on it. You have to know your stuff to hold that position.
But you shouldn't have to know it at this level. I mean, in other words, the work I had to do to figure out what the hell happened with technical and scientific immigration is a hidden study from 1986 that nobody in the outside world knew about. Nobody can devote 2 years of their life generically in order to figure these things out. And so the problem is we have to actually take the ground for the middle get rid of the crazies on both ends, and have an idea that fundamentally...
Or at least stop the crazies from taking out the reasonable people. That's the issue. Well, because stopping the crazies, that's like, well, probably not, because they're always there. But getting their hands from around the necks of the people who are sensible would be a useful, at least intermediary step.
I have learned painfully that I have more in common with what would now be considered center-right than I do with radical left.
Yeah.
And so this idea of reaching across the aisle and saying, you take out your trash, I'll take out mine,
yeah.
right, is a very important move that is not happening. And so that's
one of the things that's weird about the Candace Owen, Charlie Kirk situation is, like, when I went to the Aspen Ideas Festival, the people who invited me there, I wouldn't say they're not canonical members of the commentariat. They're people who are feeling tremendous pressure, and that's partly why they invited me. And I did get invited. And then I discussed the things that I was discussing. But I wouldn't say that I felt welcome there at all. And so one of the things that's weird about going to talk to these conservative groups is, like, I went down to Dallas and I talked to these women, and I didn't give a conservative talk.
Right.
I gave the sort of talk that I'm having right now. But they were conservative, but at the same time, they were actually listening to what I was saying, and they were receptive to it. And so then when I go to talk to the leftist types, it's like that they're ideologically possessed, let's say, in the same manner, but they're not open at all.
Okay, but I experienced something slightly different. I see exactly this. I am more welcome in center-right circles than I am in even center-left circles, because of the contamination has gotten much farther from the extreme into the center and the left. Yeah. But there's still this other thing, like, you know, I hear the word libtard,
yeah,
and I'm just like, oh, for Christ's sake, really? Mm-hmm. You know, oh, you want to enslave everybody. Oh, your monster turned on you. And I just think, okay, this is some pre-programmed set of moves. And, you know, in your comment section, there is much more of this stuff than I'm used to in other people's comment sections.
Yeah,
There's something
comment
about,
sections are nuts.
No, but I'm saying something about your audience.
Yeah.
That somewhere in your evolution, you have to watch the fact that there is this increase in the incivility on the right. And, you know, I focus my energy on the left because it's my responsibility. I don't think the right is my responsibility. But
well, these people are struggling with the same problem you laid out at the beginning, though. It's like, we can make the case for civility, and should, but you say, well, the civility only goes so far till you defend yourself. It's like, yeah, well, that's a big problem. It's like, exactly how far does it go? And then how do you defend yourself? And when you're defending yourself, what strategies do you use? Now, one of the things I learned, and I talked about this with Dave last night, and it's something I think that we should think about as members of this loose group, is that you don't defend yourself more than is absolutely necessary, right? It's a minimal necessary force doctrine is the correct one. And so libtard and that sort of thing could probably be shelved as ineffective and counterproductive, right? Although part of the reason that it's coming up, at least in part, is an attempt to defend.
It's not ineffective and counterproductive. It's offensive and stupid.
Well, okay, that's fine.
Right.
That's fine. But my point is, it's actually technically complicated. It's like, it's not that easy to mount an effective defense that isn't simultaneously an attack. Like, you have to be very, like, I want to push you back just far enough so you're back, but no farther. It's like, and I mean, that's worked out in my situation so far, because generally when I've been attacked publicly in the press, even in interviews,
right,
I've been able to use minimal necessary force. And every time that's happened, it's worked. And so one of the things I would recommend, and this would be to your listeners and viewers, and perhaps to mine as well, perhaps to yours, is that don't push back any harder than you have to, right? Because it gets rapidly counterproductive.
Do it in a balanced fashion. My typical thing is, if somebody's going to come on gangbusters and I give them 3 opportunities or so to cut it out and they refuse to,
Yeah, I like the rule of 3 a lot.
But like,
You've been
then I
talking about
smack them to the curb, and then I offer them a hand up.
Right,
and then the key
right,
question is, okay, you're going to bite the hand up, then we have a further problem, because now you're just on some sort of unbounded descent into hell, and I'm not interested in following you there. But I think, that what's really going on, and this is the hardest point to make, is that we need 2 new sort of hermaphroditic parties that combine elements of right and left that don't look like the terrible situation that we inherited from the baby boomers, no offense, sir, where for a very long period of time, we've been under one group set of ideas that are crashing and burning. And whatever the new thing that replaces right and the new thing that replaces left is going to have combinations of these things. And so, for example,
maybe situation-specific.
Well, this is the thing.
Well.
Like,
more differentiated.
Every smart person I know is pro-market. The key question is, do you believe that the market should be allowed to do everything? Like, you get these very purist things. Like, I'm an Ayn Randy, and I'm a guaranteed free marketeer. But then you put things in front of them, and you say, look, should physics be allowed to sign a licensing deal where we charge you for everything we've created, like the semiconductor, you know, or the communications equipment that you use to run your life? Because if you want to talk to me one more time about tax dollars for science, I'm going to point out to you that you're breaking a compact that we had, that you were going to support us and we weren't going to charge you. Because if we charge you, we're going to be the ones with the yachts and the fourth homes, and you're not going to be able to pay your physics bill. You know, and the point of this is, when you welch on a contract and you start to say, no, it's the market. Well, guess what? You know, public goods are part of markets, and they're very valuable, and they're hard to get anyone to pay for them. And so you have to use some amount of violence, right? Weber's theory is that a government is a monopoly on violence, and that's why it exists. When you have these very pure ideological positions that are not tutored by reality or deeper theory, they are very, very difficult to dislodge people from. Now, because you are taking a ton of risk as a small business owner, you are going to be predisposed towards a libertarian mindset, because you're not only making money from your hard work, you're making money from the fact that you're taking on huge amounts of risk. And when people don't identify risk management as a source of inequality, we've got a problem. On the other hand, there are a ton of people I know in New York who are making money hand over fist by extracting it through rent seeking, by putting themselves as the toll collectors so that everybody who's got to do business has to pay them off in some sort of legalized form of corruption. And those people, I fundamentally think we should have clawed back their property on Long Island and come up with Clawback National Seashore when we bailed them out in the Great Recession and collapse in 2008. Now,
well, maybe we'll get lucky, and and I'm thinking that this is a possibility, is that these increasingly long-form opportunities for communication and the rise of podcasts and the rise of audiobooks and all of that is going to produce a more educated and committed electorate, and they will be sophisticated enough to start to sort out these problems without recourse to these ideological, or with less recourse to these ideological oversimplifications.
They're still fighting us.